Hello, I'm Rex Childhouse, and because things on the internet seem to lose their date references pretty easy, today is Friday, July 14th, 2023. On our big vacation spanning May and June of 2023, we drove from San Diego County to Vancouver, British Columbia, took a Disney Wonder Cruise into Alaska, and then driving back home, we meandered our way through a number of museums. And this video addresses the Boeing Future of Flight Museum at Paine Field in Everett, Washington. And a lot of the museum is history. I will agree with the statement, if you do not understand history, you will not have much of a future. So a lot of it has to do with the past and the present, and some of it has to do with the future. And one of the things in particular I'm going to show you caused me to laugh because it goes to an event in my career that I took a lot of criticism for, and it turns out that I was right, and it's kind of fun. Let's move on to the video. As you drive around the west side of Paine Field, there are numerous signs taking you into the Boeing Future of Flight Museum. Outside, this is the entrance. Outside, there's not a whole lot telling you what it is till you get up to the very close door. Once you walk inside, there is a banner, and you pay your admission, which I thought was reasonable, walking in. This particular mural takes you from literally the start of aviation, being 1915, 1903s. Earlier than that, that's okay. And then it steps you through numerous years and numerous advancements as you go. It's really interesting, and I really enjoyed this museum because of the detail and the accuracy and the progression of aviation. It wasn't so much, in my opinion, future of flight as it was documentation of flight. They went from 1903 all the way up to the stuff that we're putting in space today and the stuff that they're working on for the future. Kind of cool. Boeing is wondering, dreaming about what the next 100 years is going to be. So am I. I'm kind of interested. I'd like to be here for the next 100 years. One of the more interesting things, only because I know the history, and when I was going through aviation, or when I was going through A&P school at Southern Illinois University, Boeing was giving us a lot of the documentation, maintenance-wise, for the 747, partly because they wanted the mechanics coming out of A&P school to be able to maintain their aircraft. And they had this massive display that talks about how Wantrip and Pan Am worked with Boeing to create what we know as the 747. There's a fair amount of information on the Boeing 777 and the Boeing 787, the Dreamliner, because of the technological advances that those aircraft made along the way. I look at what I learned during my aerospace education and say this stuff was totally out of the game. They do show space stuff, the Destiny Lab module for the International Space Station. And the future of flight is in space. It's all over the place. Really nice display on the ISS. I thought that was interesting. There was a special on the ISS recently, and today is July 14th, 2023, and tonight at 9:04 the ISS will be passing over Southern California, and it'll be very, very bright. There is a training module for the International Space Station at the Boeing Future of Flight Museum, and we got to spend some time walking through it. It's really interesting. The big difference between our tour and if we had seen it in space was we aren't in zero G, so our feet were always on the ground. We were never floating. That was disappointing. The Boeing Future of Flight Museum addresses autonomous and UAV type vehicles, which really caught my interest because, and I'm going to show you an article I wrote for an international aviation magazine when I was the editor, and I proposed a science into the future scenario where unmanned aircraft were flying off U.S. Navy aircraft carriers. When it published in the magazine, I got calls from 3-star admirals, 2-star admirals, Navy captains, Navy commanders, all sorts of people telling me that this would never ever happen, that unmanned air vehicles would never be flying off U.S. Navy ships. Well, first of all, unmanned air vehicles have flown off Navy ships for a number of years, and back in the 50s and 60s we had unmanned helicopters that were flying off as anti-submarine aircraft. So that statement's invalid. I got a number of calls from similar rank people saying, really cool idea, thanks for inspiring our imagination, really cool. And I got a number of calls from industry people saying, really cool, we're working on this stuff. Well, if you look on the internet for the Northrop Grumman X-47B, you'll find that unmanned air vehicles are operating and have operated, I should say, have operated off U.S. Navy aircraft carriers. They're coming. When you limit your imagination, you limit your future, and that's my statement with this article. At the Boeing Museum, they do address unmanned submersible vehicles. If you're a believer in the fact that we have been visited by aliens, which I believe is possible, to say we haven't, that's an absolute, and I'm opposed to absolutes. When people tell me always, never, everyone, no one, those are absolutes, and they're usually false. So Boeing is working with, and technology is working with unmanned submersible vehicles. We've been in that arena actually for a long time too. Now they're just pushing the technology. Supersonic transport, really cool. Lots of stuff shown at the museum about supersonic transport and hypersonic transport into the future, and that's, in my opinion, slick. Go back to Star Wars. It's called the plausible impossible. At the moment, the spaceships that fly in Star Wars cannot fly. We don't have the knowledge right now, the technological knowledge of how to make those aircraft fly, those spacecraft fly. But yet we watch the show and say, wow, this is like really cool. Limit your imagination, limit your future. That's just the way it goes. We're going to have to change aircraft design. One of the instructors I had when I was going through aerospace education talked about, in particular, because we'd worked on it, the Cessna 177 Cardinal, which is a strutless high-wing Cessna aircraft. And when you got in the aircraft, you had this massive overhead spar. And his question was, we really made the aircraft nice. We gave it auto-type doors so you could get in really comfortable, really easy. We took the wing strut off the aircraft so that it looked like really cool and you could walk around without having to walk around the wing strut. And we added this massive wing spar, significant additional weight. Why? If we're going for efficiency, is efficiency over looks, and with the Cardinal, it was looks over efficiency, and that's not the way it's going. Personal aircraft, we're going to get personal aircraft. We've got personal aircraft now. Now what do we do with them? How do we operate them? And personal opinion, when we become as common with personal aircraft as we are with cars today, the skies are going to be just as bad as our highways. They do have some really beautiful personal aircraft, though. Sustainability is a phrase you're hearing quite a bit. Fully support sustainable evolution. We're only about 100 years late in even starting the process. Space is one of the several futures of flight. There's numerous futures of flight, particularly if you consider underwater flight, and that's going to be a whole new thing. So let's go into space. let's occupy the moon. Let's go to Mars. Let's go beyond that. All we have to figure out is how to do it. And right now we use very powerful rockets, and we need to come up with something like Star Wars does. Have you ever noticed that they hardly ever refuel a ship or service a spacecraft in Star Wars? Really cool. They do have stuff about the Artemis 1 mission back to the moon. About time we went back to the moon. There's a man there, so let's go visit him and say hello again. I like the museum because it sparks your imagination, and with your imagination we have possibilities. With possibilities we have accomplishment, and it was really cool. They did talk about space, they talked about flight in atmosphere, they talked about flight below the surface of the water, which is really cool. They brought up the sky grid and how it could work and how it would control things going around, which was kind of interesting. We have a mini sky grid right now through our air traffic control system and through our airways. But if we get the personal aircraft that they're dreaming of, that they're believing could be possible in the future, where, quote unquote, every person has an air vehicle parked in their garage, we're going to need something much, much more substantial than we've got right now. Quite honestly, I think what we ought to get is we ought to get cars that link together, so I can get in my car, I can turn around and say, I want to drive to the Los Angeles Science Museum. And then I start driving, and my car links in with other cars that move into the fast lane, and we all zoom down the fast lane, and as appropriate, cars peel out of that lane and cars enter that lane, and my car routes me there, and all I do is monitor it. I disagree with sleeping at the wheel while my car's in motion. One of the things we really need to do, and I thought this was kind of interesting, was go through the gift shop, because in the gift shop there's a lot of displays. These are yokes and control wheels from a number of different airplanes, and they showed where they were, and there was a label underneath what was there. Let's take a look at the area around Paine Field, and Paine is Paine. From that terrace, here's a couple of shots we took. These are a couple of 787s that are waiting for whatever. And there's these neat signs that tell you what you're looking at as you look around. And it's really interesting because they explain how the system works. Going back inside, there's a display for Rosie the Riveter, and Rosie the Riveter proves that when we band together, we can accomplish the impossible and make it fairly easy. Kind of cool. And they show some of the aircraft which they refer to as Heritage Company aircraft that Rosie the Riveter was responsible for. The Douglas SDB Dauntless dive bomber being assembled, the North American T-6 Texan trainer being assembled, the Boeing B-17 in its final assembly, and the North American P-51 Mustang. Kind of cool. Really, really neat that they did that. I've been in a couple of museums that identify the North American P-51 Mustang and identify how the U.S. Army, Army Air Corps, Army Air Force, whatever it was, put out a contract or a request for a proposal, and North American came back and produced the aircraft in 90 days. This explains it correctly. The P-51 Mustang was actually built for the Brits during the battle, as a result of the Battle of Britain. So, wish they kind of get their facts right. Maybe that goes along with a couple of museums I know that have the UH-1 Huey on display, and they identify the UH-1 Bell helicopter, which is the Iroquois, as the Huey. I read things for what they say. I like correct signage. So this prop blade is from a P-51 Mustang. As you tour through the Boeing Future of Flight Museum, my opinion, most of it is history and present, but without history and present, you have no idea where you can go. It opens up your imagination, and so you go. There's hundreds of beautiful models throughout the museum, and I really like that. Joyce and I spent about 2.5 to 3 hours at the museum. We moved on because our next visit that day was the Washington State Historical Museum, which was another good visit, and that'll be the next video that we make, and it'll also be a short one. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I think this is a great place to go. If we had not had the Washington State Historical Museum as our next schedule for the same day, I probably would have spent 4 to 5 hours there, only because I would have read the signs. This was a great visit.